Welcome everyone to today's session, the STEM talk session, session 26. We're really pleased to have today 4 excellent students who are going to be presenting on a variety of topics. My name's Dan Friedman. I'm a philosophy PhD student at Stanford and a Polygen's mentor. And I'm really fortunate to have the opportunity to moderate today's session, hear about everyone's interesting research. The goal of these sessions is, and the broader goal of the symposium itself, to celebrate and showcase the hard work of the students participating in our program. And so I'm especially pleased to have 4 hardworking students here to present their research to us. So the way it's going to work is how it's been working in other sessions you've maybe been able to attend. Each student will have about 8 to 10 minutes to give an overview of their research. We'll take questions throughout, so I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and if we have time at the end of each individual presentation, we'll take sort of directed questions to the presenter. If, however, we're running out of time, I might remand sort of all questions to a sort of rapid fire discussion at the end. In any case, I'm really excited to get things started, and I'm going to ask that Chloe kick us off today. So thanks so much, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chloe Liu, and I'm a junior at Homestead High School. My research paper is titled Evaluating Clear Aligners and Conventional Braces in Treating TMJ and Speech Impediment Issues. The past 2 decades have seen a resonating development in the primary motivating factor of adult patients pursuing orthodontic treatment. There is an increasing demand for dental facial aesthetics in the adult population, as the prevalence of edentalism in adults aged 65 years or older is rapidly declining. One misconception that has remained constant is how orthodontic treatment is purely cosmetic. While it is a fact that orthodontic treatment can align bone structure and fix teeth deformities, treating these issues can have more long-term benefits than people realize. Orthodontics is the study of aligning teeth, closing gaps between teeth, and correcting occlusions that deviate from the ideal bite, which are also known as malocclusions. Orthodontic treatment involves diagnosis and studies of tooth positioning, but patients do not only visit orthodontics for straightening teeth. Clinically, patients may present with conditions such as temporomandibular joint, TMJ pain, receding gums, headaches, teeth abnormalities, and speech impediments, and more. Therefore, orthodontists must act fast and efficiently with treatment, thus changing this purely cosmetic stereotype told throughout the years. The first step in writing this paper was developing a research question posed: are adult patients with speech impediment or TMJ issues more likely to have a better outcome in treatment with these symptoms with conventional braces, example, traditional braces, or new orthodontic treatment, example, clear aligners? In order to answer this question, I broke it down into 3 parts. The first part was researching the type of malocclusions that cause speech impediment and TMJ issues. The second part was researching which treatment option is best for treating each class of malocclusion. Thus, evaluating the 2 options takes into account other external factors of comfortability, compliance, cost, and efficiency. The main cause of several dental facial deformities are malocclusions. Malocclusions are known as the deviation from the ideal bite, and it is the most common reason for orthodontic treatment. A malocclusion may arise if the maxilla, the bone that forms the upper jaw, and the mandible, the lower jaw, are not correctly aligned. There are 3 classes of malocclusions that individually create a different shape in the mouth and formulate unique symptoms for the patient. Connecting back with my research question, this paper will focus on treatment of speech impediments and temporomandibular jaw issues with the use of conventional materials versus clear aligners specifically. The temporomandibular joint, or TMJ, is the joint connecting the lower jaw and the skull. The movement in this joint allows a person to open and close their mouth and chew from side to side. If a patient hears clicking, ringing, or buzzing in the ears, has pain in the jaw joint, exhibits grinding, more typically at night, and has difficulty opening and closing the mouth, mandible mobility, which is also known as, this could all be a sign that teeth are not meeting each other appropriately. And according to an article by Altman et al., TMJ pain was concluded to be the highest in class 3 malocclusion patients at 90.90%. However, a separate study found class 2 to be the leading cause of TMJ pain by 48% compared to the other classes. If TMJ disorders are left untreated, there is a potential to contribute to a patient's discomfort and tension in the mouth. Just like TMJ issues, speech impediments like lisps and mispronunciations are often caused by malocclusions. Issues like overjets, class 2 division 1, open bites class 3, underbites class 3, or cross bites class 1. In order to speak clearly, the cheeks, jaw, and teeth must work together to produce articulated speech. If there is not enough room for the tongue, like in cross bites or underbites, speech is heavily affected. If a patient cannot produce clear and recognizable words, this can also affect performance and functioning in the educational and work environment, making it difficult for adults to maintain a basic lifestyle. Additionally, lisping and mispronunciation can be caused by wide gaps in between the teeth. Clear aligners and conventional braces are often ways to treat these classes of malocclusions, and orthognogenic surgery is often not needed for resolving moderate speech impediments such as lisping and mispronunciation. So after I took the steps to research the classes of malocclusions that cause these issues, I researched the best treatment options for specific malocclusion cases. Many research articles had different results, but the most common result found was that both options can correctly treat simple malocclusions, class 1 and 2. Braces were found more effective in controlling teeth torque, which is good for improving severe malocclusion cases. Conventional braces are also highly recommended for non-surgical cases because of the precise wiring and retention, not to mention less compliance in terms of keeping them clean and lower costs compared to Invisalign. On the other hand, clear aligners have an advantage in the segmented movement of teeth and shortened treatment duration, which is what they're known for. They're also more aesthetically pleasing since they're not visible and cause no differences in articulation in the meanwhile while you have the Invisalign in your mouth. But clear aligners will struggle to produce adequate occlusal contacts and may only be used for simple malocclusions, like the moderate class 1 and 2. Clear aligners require a lot more reliance and compliance, requiring additional effort to maintain clean teeth. Few research articles recommend clear aligners for severe and moderate cases. Instead, they suggest clear aligners for simple malocclusions like moderate class 1 and 2. In this case, clear aligners would be the best treatment for speech impediments issues caused by overjets and crossbites, and braces, conventional braces, for treating problems caused by open bites and underbites, depending on the severity of the case. With TMJ pain caused by non-severe class 1, 2, and 3 malocclusions, clear aligners and traditional braces will work efficiently. However, orthognogenic surgery may be needed with class 3 to realign the jaw depending on the severity of the case again. Therefore, clinicians should consider the orthodontic appliance's characteristics when making these difficult treatment decisions. Still, a definite answer as to whether or not conventional braces are more efficient than clear aligners in treating patients with TMJ and speech impediments is inconclusive due to the mixed opinions within the amount of research articles I had researched. And future studies, such as clinical trials, should be conducted to support the evidence found for the systematic review. The direction of future clinical trials should be geared towards taking multiple patients with TMJ and speech impediment and treating them with clear aligners and conventional braces to see which treatment option is better suited for the patient at hand. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation and the research that I've done for apologists.
Thank you so much, Chloe, for that excellent presentation. As a former Invisalign user myself, I found it absolutely fascinating, so thank you. We have a few questions, so I'll just go over a few of them before moving forward. A question from the audience asks if there's a certain age at which these types of treatments should be considered.
Yes, so So from the research that I've done, when you're like a child, when you're 7 years old, it's actually really important to go to the orthodontist then, because your teeth are still developing. They could still be moved really easily in the mouth, and so you should really go check it out, mainly around the age of 7, because I think that's when like your teeth are more able to move easier. And I know that I did this systematic review based on adults, and that is why it was really difficult for me to find research, because a lot of the adult teeth was already in place. So it's really hard to move their teeth, and it takes more time. It takes more amount of years to actually move their teeth into the place that they want. So I would say definitely being a teenager, being a child, and going get your braces early and palatal expanders, things like that. That is the perfect age to get that perfect teeth and solve those malocclusions. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. A sort of follow-up question is maybe taking things in a different direction, but Chloe, can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in this research? Was it through personal experience with aligners, or just a general interest in orthodontistry?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So actually, since 4 years old, I wanted to be a dentist. And then I don't know, I just wanted to be a dentist. And then I started like researching the position a bit more. And I found that orthodontics requires 2 more years of residency, and it requires mainly a focus around braces and a focus around like shaping teeth to get the perfect teeth that you want. And I've learned that with teeth comes confidence. With perfect teeth comes less insecurities, more self-esteem. And personally speaking, I had a speech impediment issue because of my teeth. They were not formed correctly. And when I was like 10 years old, I got a palatal expander. I got the braces. I mainly got everything you can imagine for that, because my teeth were so crooked. And I was really insecure. I could barely talk because of my issue. And so after going to the orthodontist, I found that my confidence really improved, and I began to love public speaking, and I began to get involved with many more clubs on campus with Future Business Leaders of America, which also led me to give more presentations like these. And I want to pursue orthodontics in my career, which is also why I chose polygence, because I wanted to know if I could solidify my interest for orthodontics. And I think I did that.
Well, thanks so much, Chloe, both for your excellent and fascinating presentation, for turning a passion into this opportunity of research here at Polygence. Thanks so much, Chloe Liu. And now we'll turn the mic over to Tejas Mahesh.
Good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon. Yeah, let me just quickly share my screen. Yeah. Well, first of all, good afternoon, since it's now 12 p.m. in the Pacific. My research was on stellar and galaxy formation and evolution. So first of all, thank you to my mentor for really helping me out on this. It was a very long process, but I definitely enjoyed it. So my question was, what are the parameters of stellar and galaxy formation and evolution? So let's begin with galaxy formation. There are 2 ways to look at stellar formation, actually. One is looking at the really small portions of how the star evolves through gas infall, but in a really micro sense. But the other way is to look at it from a macro sense through galaxy formation, which I will attempt to do here. So galaxies are important because they help us understand how our universe has formed and evolved since the Big Bang. Galaxies are essentially a cluster of stars and an interstellar medium of gas and dust. Since galaxy formations are precursors to star formation and subsequently the star formation rate, it is important we understand how they form and how they evolve. We can think of galaxies as astronomical laboratories, with each laboratory showing different results, and we as researchers must understand what the underlying connections are between each of those. What are the underlying guidelines? and the physical processes that they follow as they evolve. These astronomical laboratories are excellent to gauge the efficiency of the lambda CDM model of the universe. So we can classify galaxies based upon their shapes. The Hubble's tuning fork diagram on the left shows from left to right the eccentricity of the ellipticals and the different spirals, ones with bars, which is denoted by SBs, and ones without bars, which is just denoted by S. We can further classify them as spheroidals and disks, with ellipticals and lenticulars denoted by S0, as underneath the spheroidal category, whereas spirals and irregulars are part of the disks. Spheroidal galaxies are marked by a more redder color. These galaxies are more massive and constitute old stars. They have low star formation rate since they're rather old, and also have less gas. They're supported by velocity dispersion. Disks, on the other hand, are supported by star rotation, and they contain a mix of old and young stars. They have more gas and higher star formation rate. However, they are less massive, and they do have a bluer color. So I took the diagram from the right by Vladimir Avilary's paper on understanding galaxy formation and evolution. This picture was just indicated just to emphasize the irregularities in galaxies. As you can see, the irregulars just really don't have much of a shape at all. They don't have any specific shape that we can classify into. All right, so let's begin into disk galaxy formation and evolution. Since spheroidal galaxies are formed through mergers of disk galaxies, we shall begin with how the disk galaxies are actually formed. So there are 5 steps to how disk galaxies are formed. The first is the creation of dark matter halo growth. The second is the infall of gas into the center and how it cools very fast. The third is the disk being formed. Fourth is how the stars also begin to form, since after all, stars are the main essence of the galaxy. And finally, the fifth is how the galaxy evolves over time, known as secular evolution. So first, the dark matter halo growth. Since we can't really see dark matter, we observe the effects of dark matter on its surroundings, specifically through baryonic matter. Baryonic matter is like the matter that we can see, for example, it's the matter that makes up the stars or the books on their bookshelves, so stuff of that nature. The baryonic matter follows a hierarchical clustering model, which we can finally infer that dark matter also followed a similar pattern. And the cosmic structures formed through the baryonic matter occurred through the process of continuous mass aggregation. The mass aggregation history tells that there was a combination of smooth continuous mass accretion with violent major mergers. So this indicates to us that there were 2 phases to how dark matter affected the growth of galaxies. The first one is that there was an early phase of fast mass aggregation of major mergers between 2 different galaxies. And the late phase is the one of slow aggregation, the one of smooth mass accretion. So now dark matter is distributed depending on the environment. So in low density environments, dark matter halos live mostly in isolated areas, like in disks at the end of the spiral point. Recall that disks are also less massive than spheroidals, which is probably why they live, which is basically the low density environment. In higher density environments, more halos are formed. And when halos merge, subhalos are also created. So we can see more subhalos in higher density environments, which also indicates that there were times when there were major mergers of galaxies. The second step in galaxy formation is the infall of gas into that potential well of dark matter halo. For the galaxy to form, gas must gravitationally collapse. However, as the gas collapses, the pressure increases. And because the pressure and temperature are directly proportional to each other, the temperature also increases, which counteracts the gravitational collapse since the gas now has kinetic energy and wants to move. So for the galaxy to form, we need the gas to cool not only gravitational collapse, but also cool, which they do through thermal radiation, which allows them to fall freely into the center. So once a gas cools and collapses inwards, it reaches a rotational balance in a disk form, as you can see on the right, with those spirals outwards. Now, even though baryons are a small fraction in cold dark matter halos, the disk formed in the center is so dense that the baryons make a greater contribution to the inner gravitational potential well, more than the dark matter. So essentially, the baryonic matter finally takes over the kinematical structure of the galaxies and the rotations, and yeah. So now let's discuss the star formations, since this is what makes a galaxy a galaxy. Star formations can be studied in two ways, as I said earlier. This one on a micro level with small scale physics with molecular cloud fragments, or on a larger scale physics through global instabilities and larger molecular clouds. Through the latter, we can see how star formation is regulated in the galaxy. There are two approaches. The first approach, the halo cooling feedback approach. The cool gas is reheated by the star formation feedback and driven back into that intrahalo medium until it cools radiatively and creates new stars. So essentially the gas is contained inside the galaxy and does not actually expand. It's not thrown completely outwards, which helps the galaxy create more stars. The second one is we can also look at it through self-regulation. We can also look at self-regulation through the disk turbulent interstellar medium approach. In this approach, they assume that star formation to be triggered by disk gravitational instabilities. And yeah, in this form, the galaxy is self-regulated by a balance of the energy injected by supernovas and the dissipation of the turbulent interstellar medium. And finally, I know there are more slides, I apologize. In secular physics, secular evolution is defined as slow changes in the motion of sun or planets. And this occurs when the evolution of galaxies is disrupted by a merger or with some type of distance interaction with another galaxy. It leads to a vertical thickening and heating of the disk and the formation of bars, or the formation of pseudobulges. So this eventually leads them to becoming spheroidal galaxies. And finally, through the spheroidal galaxies, which is the second category, can be formed in two different ways. The first one, as I discussed earlier, is through single violent event of a major merger of a disk. If the disks were mostly gaseous, then the situation is described as a monolithic collapse. If the disks are mostly stars, then it merged kind of silently without disrupting the processes on a major scale. The other way for spheroidal galaxies to form is through disks developing spheroids in the centers through secular evolution. So based on this, we can infer that spheroidal galaxy formation, that massive elliptical galaxies formed early on and in short timescales by the merging of gas-rich disks. This indicates that A, that there was an ultra-luminous burst of star formation, which established a spheroidal structure in the center, and B, the gas collapse to the center indicates the growth of pre-existing massive black holes. C, the active galactic nucleus is turned kind of on, which indicates that there's a high luminosity, and the switching off of the AGN, the active galactic nucleus, leads to the supermassive black hole. So yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. These were the papers that I used. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that really, really interesting and thorough presentation. We only have time for a few questions, so I'll start with the first. So one question concerns the role of dark matter in some of the inferences you ended up reaching. So I guess the question is something like, dark matter is this sort of theoretical placeholder. If, as our understanding of the universe and our sort of grand physical theories change, and we sort of have different sort of things we're plugging into that placeholder, how might that affect your results?
So dark matter specifically is, from what we currently understand about dark matter, is that there's a it's what we call a scalar field where the particles exist, and so we understand that dark matter, we have narrowed down to the fact that dark matter is probably a particle, but it doesn't, the effects of dark matter does not really change how the galaxies formed, because we're looking at dark matter from the lens of the effects on galaxies. So it shouldn't really affect how the galaxies form. We may understand more about dark matter, that's the goal, which may open up new areas in the scientific field, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that galaxy formation would completely change.
Great, thank you. And then the final question is just what sorts of avenues this kind of research might encourage you to pursue in the future?
Well, as a person, I really enjoyed evolutions of anything. So whether it be like biology or just evolution of ideas over history, for example. I would like to look more into how the universe formed, specifically more into the cosmic microwave background radiation, since that has been playing a really big role. Actually, my mentor is working on the CMBs. So yeah, that has been really interesting to read over. So yeah.
Great, thanks so much again for your excellent presentation. And now we will turn things over to Caden Hu. Take it away.
All right. My name is Caden Hu, and today my review paper is on the treatment mechanisms for antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance, I'm just going to call it AMR from now on. It's really hard to say really fast. So what is it? It is the ability for microbes to withstand the treatments that we throw at it to actually kill it or treat. Selective evolutionary pressures from the antibiotics cause the resistance, cause the evolution of this of AMR. Because bacteria, most microbes or most antigens have really short spans, which allows them to evolve really fast. And so the ones that are resistant will evolve and reproduce, causing the formation of AMR. So the costs of antimicrobial resistance, it was directly attributed to 1.3 million deaths in 2019 alone, estimated 10 million deaths by 2050. This estimation is by the World Health Organization. It costs the US $20 billion annually alone, and it does lose $35 billion in product. There is a really big economic factor to this, and of course, it is incredibly prevalent now. 40 to 50% of CUTIs tested in emergency rooms across the nation show some semblance of AMR, and 18% actually show resistance to multiple families of antibiotics, which is incredibly troubling because the more resistance there is, will continue evolving. Eventually, you'll have superbugs that are resistant to like 4 or 5 families, and then we really don't have much for it. So antibiotic treatment, which is what we're using now, 3 main mechanisms of action. So first is inactivation of the cell wall, either by the complete dissolution of the cell wall or creating holes in the cell wall. Obviously, that lysis, it kills this bacterial cell. Inactivation of protein synthesis, so it can't reproduce or repair itself. Inhibition of DNA function, whether transcription, replication, so any like DNA function. So those are 3 major mechanisms of action. So how does AMR, obviously the overuse of antibiotics leads to the evolution of AMR. So how does AMR exactly function? So there's a few major mechanisms of action. The first is the creation of inactivating enzymes, where essentially the bacteria produces an enzyme that causes the drug to lose its abilities. It reduces the cellular permeability. so the drugs can't actually enter the cell and take any effect. It changes the antibiotic target. This is actually what we saw with the spike proteins of COVID evolving to become resistant to our vaccines. It's the same idea. And of course, increased outflow of the cell where it just flushes out everything from the cell too fast for any of the drugs actually. How do we combat this? Obviously, we were continually pushing out new antibiotics from the pipeline. Every year, there's just more of them created. There are actually new methods, which is what my paper actually focuses on. There's nanoparticles, molecular machines, bacteriophages. There's more. There's immunomodulators, there's antibody treatments and microbiome treatments. There's like many new treatments that are all like in testing phases, and of course policy changes, which is what we can accomplish as of now. So for new antibiotics, there's 12 new antibiotics developed since 2017. Some of them are developed specifically to combat AMR. So you have beta-lactams, which are a class of antibiotics, which are they're like the most common ones. There's beta-lactamases, which are enzymes that bacteria produce to inactivate them. And now the new drugs have beta-lactamase inhibitors, which inhibits the inhibition of beta-lactams, making them useful again. So it's just gonna, if we continue down the cycle, it's just gonna be like a continual cycle of inhibiting this, that inhibits that. It's just a mess. So obviously it's unsustainable to continue to develop new drugs just constantly. There are financial pressures that make it unprofitable for pharmaceutical companies to develop new antibiotics because new antibiotics are often ignored in clinical practice unless it's in the most extreme of cases. And if you don't use a product, you don't buy a product, which means that it's unprofitable for these pharmaceutical companies to continue to produce. So the first new treatment we have is nanoparticles, which are molecules that are between 1 and 100 nanometers, hence the name. So there are two major classes. There's organic and inorganic nanoparticles. For organic nanoparticles, liposomes, polymeric nanoparticles, micelles, all of those are, they mainly function as drug delivery systems. And what's really interesting about these is that it actually times the release of the drugs in a certain specific part of the body, which allows for increased efficacy. We actually already use these, the liposomes. We use those as the structure that transports the mRNA COVID vaccine. So that's already used in clinical medicine, although it's still like not mainstream. For inorganic nanoparticles, these are most often metal or metal oxide nanoparticles, and they do have a synergetic effect with antibiotics, which means that while they do have antibacterial properties when used alone, when used with current antibiotics, they actually increase their effects more than the sum of their parts. So the most prominent are gold and silver nanoparticles, and they have many bactericidal mechanisms, generation of ROS, which causes oxygenative stress, which kills the cell, damages the cell membrane, lysis, and interferes with the DNA. So it's just a whole myriad of ways to kill the bacteria. However, obviously, you are injecting metal into your body, which does cause cytotoxicity and may damage human cells. And since this has been used somewhat in clinical practice, there has been instances of AMR that have been documented. Which means this isn't a very finite. This is a very finite solution. The second treatment, this is the most esoteric treatment. They're synthetic molecular motors. What they are is essentially they're molecules that when exposed to a certain stimuli, most often visible light, it actually like spins around like a drill and it punctures a hole in the bacterial cell, which kills it. Because as with most things, when your insides spill out, you die. So they actually drill into the lipid bilayer of the bacterial cell, which so what's really interesting about this is that because of their mechanical nature, but actually AMR cannot properly develop resistance to it because again of its mechanical nature, and it also has synergistic effects with currently existing products. So it can also undo the effects of AMR. So if used properly with like let's say we have a beta-lactamase cell that produces beta-lactamase. If we use beta-lactams and these molecular machines, we'll actually make the beta-lactam useful again, which is really interesting, and it is very promising, but it is incredibly early in development, and there's no clinical trials yet. The most we've tested this is on like infections on rats, and it can only be used for surface treatments. So skin, bladder, anything that can be scoped, anything that can like be exposed to visible light. And the last treatment, this is technically the oldest treatment, are bacteriophages, which are viruses that infect specific bacteria. So they replicate in the infection site and naturally die off when the infection is eliminated, which means that, and they can penetrate bacterial biofilms, which is one of the ways that bacteria develop AMR. And they have synergy with antibiotics, and they do have less side effects than traditional antibiotics, because traditional antibiotics, they flush your entire body of any bacteria, including the microbiome of the gut. So all your gut bacteria also gets killed, which is why you have microbiome or probiotics, which you use in tandem with antibiotics. But these ones, they only kill one specific type species of bacteria, which means that obviously they won't hurt any other bacteria, and therefore they have less side effects. They also are technically biological, which means that they can also evolve. So if we continue to develop them and manufacture them like every year, then AMR will never properly develop, and we can just continually use this. And also phage cocktails can be used. Cocktails are basically just a combination of the most common phages, like phages for the most common bacteria. If you just throw them all together, they serve as a cocktail, and you can just treat most bacterial infections. But obviously, they're very specific, and they can only affect one species of bacteria, which means that they can't be used for most things. Now, obviously, phage doses are unclear because there's no current restrictions or guidelines. Again, no regulatory system. And this, so for the discussion and conclusion, the methods are promising, all three of these new methods, but they are still in some stage of development. And there is no one cure, there's no panacea for antimicrobial resistance. And these are still far from mainstream clinical use, keyword being mainstream. Obviously, some of these are already used, but like not as antibacterial. Now, of course, more funding would be great, because we've seen what unlimited funding can do. We've seen COVID vaccines produced in like a year. If we had that access to funding, this problem would be mitigated at least. And obviously, there's way more types of antimicrobial resistance. Just any biological antigens, viruses, fungi, protozoa, even, and AMR will continue to increase in severity unless drastic policy changes are made to combat AMR, which is what we can do now. Obviously, for policy changes, antibiotic use must be limited and monitored. Most countries in the world, at least like the less developed ones, have over-the-counter antibiotics, which is obviously bad. Hospital policy must become more stringent. I've worked at hospitals. I've been like volunteer, I've been shadow, I've been in ORs. Their policy changes, while their policies are strict, but they could be better, I'm going to be honest. So obviously optimizing antimicrobial therapies by using less antibiotics in general, implementing additional infection control measures, all of these can mitigate the evolution of AMR. So for optimizing antimicrobial therapies, we can prevent excessive prescription of antibiotics, as with like the countries with over-the-counter antibiotics. And obviously, labs should be taken to identify any bacterial infection, and which we can then use to find the most specific antibiotics that can treat it, and therefore can't develop AMR of like generalized antibiotics cannot develop. So implementing additional infection control measures, limiting patient interaction, stricter hand hygiene, or just any hygiene guidelines, contact precautions with infected patients, and cohorting, which is basically like putting all of the infected patients in one ward. These are all actually, this has improved since like the COVID pandemic, obviously, but it's still, there is still room for. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Actually, I see.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Caden, so much for that. We're running a little bit low on time, so we'll only be able to get to one of the questions from the audience. The question has something about on a topic you just spoke about a bit. The question asks, how will policy changes make a difference in AMR? So if you could just say a little bit more about maybe the successes you might anticipate from some of the policy changes you proposed just now in your conclusion.
Obviously, hospitals are one of the locations where AMR develops the most, because there is continual antibiotic use and continual bacterial infections being spread around. So obviously hospitals are the prime location for AMR resistance to develop, AMR to develop, sorry. So if we improve the hospital policies, like if we make it more stringent, I know a lot of, because of COVID, obviously, it has a lot of these policies have already been implemented. But because like hospitals are still obviously the main breeding ground for AMR, if we do improve policies even more, which there is room for improvement, obviously because like for a lot of infections, a lot of doctors personally, honestly, they'll just throw generalized antibiotics at infections because they're too lazy to take the labs. I can say that from personal experience. So obviously, if we had policies like controlling that, that would be great. That would cause less development of antimicrobial resistance. And I think generalized like hygiene. I think even like what's the word? Just any hygiene measures that can be in, like we already have gel in, gel out, which is basically whenever you enter a patient room, you hand sanitizer, and whenever you leave, another you use hand sanitizer again. All right. But there are obviously you bring the same, you wear the same clothes into every patient room. When you're on call, you use the same PPR. It's just incredibly, bacteria spreads quickly. Just antigens spread quickly around hospitals. So if we could improve that, that would at least prevent most AMR development. I know I did read a paper about that AMR does also happen in third world countries due to poor sanitation. So it actually doesn't, it's not completely controlled by antibacterial use. It can also just happen on its own naturally, which is also kind of worrying, but most papers I've read actually dispute that. So it's probably mainly caused by bacterial use. So
thank you so much for that, Caden. We really appreciate the answer. We're going to turn over, just in the interest of time, to Shreyas, but thank you so much again for your presentation. And now we will have Shreyas.
Do you see my screen?
Yep, all good. Take it away.
Okay. Hello, this is The Journey to Proxima Centauri B by Shreyas, Ramaswamy, me, and my mentor, Mark Giovanazzi. About me. My name is Shreyas. I live in San Jose, California, and I go to Leland High School. At school, my favorite subjects are math and chemistry, but in general, my favorite subject is astronomy. In my free time, I like to play tennis and use my telescope. I love astrophotography, and with my telescope, I occasionally take images with my astrophotography camera. This is a composition of two separate images I took of Jupiter and Saturn. Introduction. To start, exoplanets are planets in other star systems. The first exoplanet, 51 Pegasi b, was discovered 27 years ago. However, we now know of more than 5,000 exoplanets. The closest exoplanet, Proxima Centauri b, is around 4.24 light years away. Due to its proximity to Earth, Proxima Centauri b is the main candidate for the first exoplanet to travel to. Technologically, interstellar travel is possible. It would just be incredibly expensive to carry out. So can we imagine traveling to another solar system? In this project, we explore a hypothetical simulation of a rocket launching from Earth to Proxima Centauri b. Proxima Centauri b. In our project, we imagine a possible expedition to Proxima Centauri b. Proxima Centauri b is located in the Alpha Centauri system, the closest star system to the solar system. The Alpha Centauri system is composed of Alpha Centauri A, B, and C, or better known as Proxima Centauri. Proxima Centauri is a much smaller star than our Sun and is known as a red dwarf, and as a result, its planets form much closer to it. Proxima Centauri is actually 20 times closer to its star than Earth is to the Sun. Proxima Centauri b is very similar to Earth. It is a rocky planet, it has a similar size and mass to Earth, and it is potentially located in its star's habitable zone. This makes a potential visit to this exoplanet very exciting. In our project, we had several goals. To simulate a hypothetical rocket trajectory from Earth to Proxima Centauri b. To do this, we also had to simulate a working solar system and Alpha Centauri system with working gravitational influence. Another goal was to make ephemeris, an astronomical term for vector coordinates for velocity and position, an attempt to properly simulate Proxima Centauri b's orbit around Proxima Centauri. Finally, our last goal was to find the amount of time a mission to Proxima Centauri would take with the highest possible velocity without including relativity. So, what do we simulate? Firstly, we simulated the solar system. We simulated the Sun and its 8 planets. We included the Sun's motion through the Milky Way galaxy relative to itself. However, the moon/minor bodies in the solar system were not included because they would not contribute much to the trajectory and would instead lag the program significantly. Here's a clip of the solar system. These are the inner planets. This is Jupiter, Saturn. These are all the planets with accurate orbits. And they're all elliptical as well. The Alpha Centauri system. Alpha Centauri A, B are part of the Alpha Centauri system. They are the central binary stars in the triple star system, and they make up the majority of the mass within the system. They are both similar in size and mass to the Sun. In our simulation, we included both stars, which have an orbital period of around 80 years. We also included their motion relative to the Sun. This is a video of Alpha Centauri AB. This is Alpha Centauri A, the more massive object. And you can see how they don't quite orbit, like one object doesn't orbit the other. They both orbit a common center of mass, and yeah. Since this is, over the center of mass. Alpha Centauri A is the more massive object, so as you can tell, it's always closer. The center of mass is always closest to it. The Proxima Centauri system. Proxima Centauri is the third star of the Alpha Centauri system. It orbits the central binary stars Alpha Centauri AB with a period of around 550,000 years. The motion of the star and its planet were simulated with respect to the Sun as well. The rocket is our last object in the system. It starts from rest, and it is impacted by all other objects in the simulation. And it also has the mass of an average rocket, but the mass was, it didn't really impact much. It may be difficult to see here, but in our simulation, the rocket had a green trail, so it would be easier to see. And we also made it take on the shape of a cube for the sake of simplicity. How did we simulate? These are the forces and equations we used within the system. We used the kinematic equations for launching and decelerating the rocket ship. We used Newton's law of gravitational force in tandem with the Euler-Kromer algorithm to constantly update the position of the rocket with the impulse formula, which would depend on the force the object experiences. The Euler-Kromer algorithm was integral to the simulation. The medium of simulation. To simulate in general, we have to use VPython, a software that runs on Python and is able to simulate 3D animations and events with physics or other basic coding. The simulation was handled by GlowScript, which is the medium for VPython. Overall, our simulation took took 402 lines of code, and it took a long time to create. Source of data. For our source of data, we use NASA's JPL Horizon system for the solar system data. The ephemerides and data for Alpha Centauri AB were taken from the ALMA telescope, and Proxima Centauri's ephemerides were taken from the Gaia Space Telescope. As I mentioned earlier, we do not know that much about Proxima Centauri B's orbital parameters, since we discovered it using the radial velocity method, which doesn't tell us much about its orbit. However, we estimated its orbital parameters with the relative distance of it compared to its star compared to Earth compared to the Sun in astronomical units, and we use the circular orbit formula to determine its velocity. The trajectory of the rocket. The start and end point of the rocket's trajectory. The rocket starts on top of Earth at rest, but then it accelerates to a velocity of 1 times 10 to the power 7 meters per second. By this time, it should already have left the solar system and should be heading toward Proxima Centauri B. In the middle of its trajectory, the rocket undergoes velocity course correction and realigns its velocity vector. After this course correction, it continues to rapidly head towards Proxima Centauri B, and then when it approaches the system, it begins to decelerate. After decelerating, it lands on top of Proxima Centauri B. Here's a video of the rocket launching from Earth. I'll skip parts of it because it's rather long. As you can see, it's accelerating here. Yeah, now it is launched. And then it's continually accelerating to 1 times 10 to the power 7 meters per second. And the time step, which basically means the speed of the simulation, is really slow here because we want to avoid any calculation mistakes that skip, and with a higher time step, the simulation skips calculations. Sorry, this is pretty lag. Okay, yeah, the rocket is still accelerating to a velocity of 1 times 10 to the power 7 meters per second, or roughly 1/30th of the speed of light. This is a solar system. Also, we chose 1 times 10 to the power 7 meters per second as the velocity because it's a fast enough velocity where we'll get a relatively quick trajectory time, but we won't have to include relativistic forces, which would affect a lot of factors of the rocket, like the mass, and it would just be too much trouble. Okay, video's about to end, and at some point you'll see that the rocket trail would have extended past the screen. Okay, now it has reached its target velocity, and the time step has changed. Velocity correction with the Rodriguez formula. In the middle of its trajectory, the rocket undergoes velocity direction course correction. This is based on its position vector and the difference of angle between its position and velocity vector. For the rocket to undergo course correction, we use the Rodriguez formula, which rotates the velocity vector to be parallel with the position vector of the Proxima Centauri B. The Rodriguez formula is a math. It's just a vector rotation, so it was interesting to use it for like a rocket simulation. And finally, here's the video of the rocket decelerating, much shorter. As you can see here, the rocket is traveling to Proxima Centauri, and it is rapidly approaching it. This is Proxima Centauri, the system. It has a velocity already because, as I explained earlier, it orbits Alpha Centauri AB. It's about to approach. Now it's approaching Proxima Centauri B and is decelerating. Now the timestamp has changed to, timestep has been changed to 0.1 for the most precise calculations, and it is about to land. Now the rocket is landing on Proxima Centauri B. Results. In our simulation, our rocket successfully reaches Proxima Centauri B in around 55 years, as you can see here. Overall, our simulation developed into somewhat of a sandbox, allowing us to change different parameters to see how the system of planets and stars would change. This project was very fascinating to work on and gave us an insight into a potential future mission to Proxima Centauri B. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to my mentor who really helped me get this project started. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Wow, Shreyas, thank you so much for that absolutely fascinating presentation. In the interest of time, we're going to move somewhat quickly through questions, if that's okay, if you're ready for rapid fire.
Sure.
The first question asks, what does the R value represent in the Euler algorithm you employed?
1 second, let me go back to the Euler-Comer algorithm.
Yes, sorry, Euler.
R just represents the position. So in our simulation, it would say like rocket.pose equals rocket.pose plus the momentum of the rocket divided by its mass times the time.
Great, thank you. Another question asks if there was anything you were surprised at over the course of your research and working with your mentor that you found difficult that you didn't initially think would pose a problem, and how maybe you overcame it in the course of getting these results.
I think the main issue we encountered with the simulation, we actually encountered kind of several. So the first one was first launching the rocket off Earth. In the beginning, we obviously didn't know about this. We didn't use the Rodriguez formula. We initially had the rocket just launching off Earth, but we noticed that for several weeks, when we gave the rocket such a small velocity, it would get sucked back into the Earth and get it would get slingshotted completely away from the solar system. And that's because in our simulation there's no physical surface. So if the rocket crashes into the Earth, it'll keep going and continuing out of the Earth, and it'll just get ejected. But the major issue encountered was finding coordinates for Proxima Centauri B. This is what it looked like in our simulation, but initially it was difficult to we had to change the circular velocity. We had to kept messing around with the parameters, and eventually just realized that we could use the Earth's position and just approximate Proxima Centauri's position using the Earth's position. So multiplying it by 0.05. But there were no major issues. Maybe the rocket landing on Proxima Centauri was an issue because we didn't think of a course correction, because when it was aiming towards Proxima Centauri, and we thought it would get close to it, but then it just missed it.
Great. Well, it sounds like
sounds...
yes, despite these difficulties, you're able to generate some really fascinating results. So thank you for that, Shreyas.
Thank you.
So I guess this marks the end of our session. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank once again Shreyas, Caden, Tejas, and Chloe for their excellent work, for their participation in the PolyGens program, and for sharing their incredible research with us. So thank you all very much, and I hope to see other research projects of yours on the stage in future iterations of the symposium. Thanks very much. And thank you all in attendance. I hope you benefited from this as much as I did. Take care, everybody.